All right, let's unpack this. Today we're going deep, like deep into the world of Ross Ulbricht.
Ah, yes.
The Dread Pirate Roberts, the Silk Road,
Yeah.
names that pretty much everyone's heard of.
Right. They're synonymous with the dark web.
Exactly. The hidden corners of the internet,
Yeah.
places most people don't even know exist, or at least they didn't before Silk Road.
Yeah, Silk Road was a real turning point. It wasn't just like some online store, It is this whole system built on anonymity.
Right.
And they use things like Bitcoin and the Tor network.
Right.
It really forced people to confront some pretty uncomfortable questions about like freedom, technology, and the law.
You got that right. And for this deep dive, you sent over a whole stack of stuff. Court documents, articles from tech journals, political journals, even some of Ulbricht's personal writings.
Yeah.
I mean, what exactly are we trying to figure out here?
Well, what we're trying to unravel here is Ulbricht's true nature. Like, was he a true visionary? Did he really believe he was building a better world?
Right.
Or was he just a brilliant techie who got caught up in the thrill of running a criminal empire?
So grifter or gifted?
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question we're going to try to answer today.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself. From what I've read, Ulbricht's early life was pretty ordinary.
Yeah.
Like middle-class upbringing, went to college, studied physics.
Right.
Nothing that screams future dark web kingpin.
Right. But even then, you can kind of see the seeds of his later path, Like he was really he was deeply influenced by libertarian thinkers.
Okay.
People like Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard.
Okay. Yeah.
And he really believed in individual liberty, free markets, minimal government intervention.
Right.
These ideas, they formed the foundation of Silk Road.
Interesting. So for Ulbricht, Silk Road wasn't just about, making a quick buck.
Right.
It was about putting his ideology into practice.
Yeah.
He wanted to create a world where individuals could transact freely.
Yes.
Outside the reach of what he considered oppressive government control.
Absolutely. He believed that that the war on drugs was totally unjust.
Okay.
That people should just be able to buy and sell whatever they want, without interference.
Yeah.
He saw Silk Road as a way to circumvent those laws and create a truly free market.
Okay, but that's where things get complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because even if you agree with his his libertarian principles, the reality is that Silk Road became a hub for all sorts of illegal activity.
Right.
Drugs, weapons, stolen data. I mean, it wasn't just about selling homemade crafts on Etsy.
No, definitely not. And that's where the whole visionary versus villain debate really heats up.
Right.
Ulbricht's supporters, they say he was just providing a platform.
Right.
That he wasn't directly responsible for the specific actions of, the buyers and sellers. They compare it to eBay. They say, look, eBay doesn't police what people sell. They just provide the marketplace.
That's an interesting comparison. But the argument against that is, of course, that Ulbricht knew exactly what was being sold on his platform.
Right.
I mean, he profited directly from it, and he actively worked to, keep it hidden from law enforcement.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes this case so fascinating. It forces us to ask, how far does individual liberty extend?
Right.
Where do we draw the line between personal freedom and the responsibility to prevent harm?
All right, so we've got this idealistic young man,
Yeah.
deeply committed to his libertarian principles, who creates this groundbreaking but ultimately illegal online marketplace.
Right.
But then things take an even darker turn with the emergence of the Dread Pirate Roberts persona.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
This is where the story gets really intriguing.
Okay.
So Ulbricht, he takes the pseudonym from the book and movie The Princess Bride.
Okay.
And he uses it to kind of cultivate this air of mystery and authority on Silk Road. He becomes this online legend, dispensing wisdom, interacting with users,
Right.
all while remaining completely anonymous.
It almost sounds like he was playing a character,
Yeah.
like this larger-than-life persona that was totally separate from the real Ross Ulbricht.
Right. And that separation between his online persona and his real-life identity, it's fascinating.
Right.
He lived a pretty modest life offline, shared a rented apartment, didn't flaunt his wealth or anything.
Right.
But online, he was the Dread Pirate Roberts, this powerful figure at the helm of a vast digital empire.
That duality it's mind-boggling, and it makes you wonder, did the Did the anonymity of the internet, the ability to become someone else online,
Right.
did that embolden him in some way?
Yeah.
Did it contribute to the darker aspects of Silk Road, like the alleged murder for hire plots?
That's a question, psychologists and criminologists have debated for years. Anonymity can definitely have a disinhibiting effect, right? It allows people to act in ways they never would if they were easily identifiable.
Right.
So whether that's what happened with Ulbricht, we may never know for sure.
Okay, so we've got the libertarian ideals,
Yeah.
the anonymous marketplace, the mysterious online persona. It's already a pretty wild story.
Yeah.
But now, let's talk about how the Silk Road finally came crashing down.
Yeah.
How did the authorities manage to penetrate this supposedly impenetrable online fortress?
Well, the authorities, they were playing the long game here. Silk Road was on their radar for years, and they were determined to bring it down. It wasn't just about shutting down a website. They wanted to make a statement.
So how'd they do it? I mean, Silk Road is built on anonymity, encryption. It was supposed to be untraceable.
Right, and for a long time it was. But the investigators, they were relentless.
Right.
They used, I guess, a combination of, traditional detective work.
Yeah.
But also some pretty cutting-edge cyber forensics
Okay.
to slowly kind of chip away at Silk Road's defenses.
Give me an example. Like, what kind of techniques are we talking about here?
So one of their biggest breakthroughs came when they managed to identify and seize one of Silk Road's servers.
Oh, wow.
And this gave them access to, a ton of data.
Yeah.
Transaction logs, user information, even some of Ulbricht's personal communications.
That must have been a major blow to his operation.
It was. But even then, they still needed to connect all of that back to Ulbricht himself.
Right.
Remember, he was incredibly careful about, maintaining his anonymity.
So how did they finally link the Dread Pirate Roberts persona to Ross Ulbricht, the physics student from Texas?
It was a combination of things, really.
Yeah.
They tracked Bitcoin transactions. They analyzed his writing style. They even looked into his online activity outside of Silk Road. Wait, so they were building like a psychological profile of him based on his online behavior?
Exactly. And they started noticing these patterns.
Right.
For example, Ulbricht used the same pseudonym Altoid on a forum discussing libertarian philosophy.
Okay.
And also on a website promoting Silk Road back in its early days.
Oh, wow.
That was a huge clue.
So even though he was operating in the shadows of the dark web, he still left these digital footprints that led right back to him.
Exactly. And ultimately it was a series of, seemingly small mistakes that brought him down. Like using his real email address on a public forum.
Oh, wow.
Logging into his Silk Road account from a public library. I mean, those were critical errors in a world where anonymity was everything.
It's like a cautionary tale, It shows that even in the digital age, it's almost impossible to completely erase your tracks.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the importance of what they call operational security.
Right.
Especially for anyone involved in activities that might, attract unwanted attention from law enforcement.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so the FBI closes in, they arrest Ulbricht,
Right.
and the Silk Road saga comes to an end.
Well, not quite. The arrest was really just the beginning of a whole new chapter.
Okay.
The trial of Ross Ulbricht became it was a media sensation.
I bet.
Like a real-life courtroom drama that captivated the world.
I can imagine. I mean, this was a landmark case.
Yeah.
It was the first time a major dark web marketplace had been taken down.
Right.
And the guy behind it was facing, some serious charges.
Yeah.
So what was the prosecution's strategy going into the trial?
Well, they went all in.
Okay.
They painted Ulbricht as like this ruthless criminal mastermind,
Right.
a digital drug lord who had amassed a fortune by enabling the sale of, dangerous and illegal substances.
Yeah.
They presented mountains of evidence. Chat logs, transaction records, even those chilling allegations of murder for hire plots.
Yeah, you mentioned the murder for hire plots earlier.
Right.
That's one of the most controversial aspects of this whole case.
Yeah.
What do we actually know about those allegations?
It's a complicated story.
Sure.
So the prosecution alleged that that Ulbricht, as the Dread Pirate Roberts, right, had ordered hits on on several people,
Okay.
people who he believed were threats to Silk Road.
Mm-hmm.
And they presented, chat logs and other evidence
Right.
to support those claims.
But did any of those alleged hits actually happen?
That's where things get murky.
Okay.
No evidence has ever surfaced to suggest that any of the supposed victims were actually harmed. In fact, some people believe that the entire murder for hire thing was a fabrication, possibly orchestrated by a scammer who was posing as a hitman just to extort money from Ulbricht.
So the truth about the murder for hire allegations remains a mystery.
To a large extent, yeah. And that uncertainty it adds another layer of complexity to the question of, Ulbricht's true nature.
Right.
Was he really a cold-blooded criminal, willing to take a life to protect his empire?
Right.
Or was he a naive idealist who just got caught up in a dangerous game?
Right.
And made some terrible decisions.
It's a question that the jury ultimately had to grapple with when they deliberated on his fate.
Right.
What was the verdict?
Well, after a lengthy trial and a lot of deliberation, the jury found Ulbricht guilty on all charges.
Wow.
Including drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking.
And what about the murder for hire charges?
He was also convicted on those charges, despite the lack of evidence that any murders actually took place.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So what was the sentence?
The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Life in prison without parole. I mean, that's a harsh sentence.
It is, and it's a sentence that's sparked a lot of debate.
What are the arguments for and against such a severe sentence?
Well, his supporters, they argue that it's excessive, it's disproportionate,
right?
Especially considering that no one was actually killed.
Yeah.
They believe he deserves a second chance, that he's not a threat to society,
right?
That he could potentially contribute positively if given the opportunity. They point to his remorse.
Okay.
His efforts to rehabilitate himself in prison,
right?
As evidence of his potential for change.
And what about those who support the sentence?
Well, they argue that he was the mastermind behind this massive criminal enterprise that facilitated the sale of dangerous drugs, leading to addiction, potentially even deaths.
Right.
They believe that a life sentence is appropriate, given the scale and the impact of his crimes. Mm-hmm. They also point to the allegations of the murder for hire,
right,
arguing that they demonstrate his capacity for violence, his disregard for human life.
So the debate about whether Ross Ulbricht is a visionary or a villain, a grifter or gifted, continues even after his conviction and sentencing.
Absolutely, and it's a debate that really reflects broader anxieties about the dark side of technology, the limits of individual liberty,
right,
and the role of government in the digital age.
It's a fascinating, complex case that raises some fundamental questions about freedom, responsibility, and the ethical implications of technology. It seems like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. There's so much more to explore. For example, we haven't even touched on the impact of Silk Road, on the development of darknet markets, the rise of cryptocurrency, or the ongoing debate about online privacy and government surveillance.
It sounds like we could spend hours unpacking all of this. But for now, let's shift gears a little bit, and take a closer look at the arguments for and against Ulbricht's release. There's a growing movement calling for his sentence to be commuted. What are their main points? So there's this whole Free Ross movement out there. I mean, some pretty high-profile people have even spoken out in support of him.
Yeah.
What are they saying? What makes them think Ulbricht deserves another shot?
It really boils down to a few key arguments. First, there's the issue of proportionality.
Okay.
His supporters argue that a life sentence is it's too harsh. Right. For nonviolent offenses. Okay. Especially when no one was actually physically harmed as a direct result of Silk Road. Mm-hmm. They point to other cases where individuals convicted of violent crimes have received lighter sentences.
So they're saying the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Right.
that he was made an example of.
Exactly. They argue that that Ulbricht was made a scapegoat,
Okay.
like a warning to anyone else who might consider operating outside the bounds of traditional systems.
Right.
They see him as a political prisoner,
Mm.
punished for challenging status quo, for advocating for individual liberty.
What about the argument that that he enabled drug use
Right.
and potentially contributed to overdoses?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a serious accusation.
It is, but his supporters counter that by by pointing to the inherent risks associated with drug use.
Oh, right.
Regardless of where the drugs are obtained,
Right.
they argue that addiction is it's a complex issue
Yeah.
with many contributing factors, and that shutting down Silk Road wouldn't have solved the underlying problem.
So they're saying he was just providing a service to people who are already engaging in risky behavior.
Yeah.
And that criminalizing that service doesn't address the root causes of addiction.
Precisely. They also argue that that Silk Road may have actually made drug use safer in some ways.
Oh, okay.
By providing a platform for quality control and harm reduction information.
Mm.
Of course, this is a very contentious point.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
But let's move on to another argument in favor of Ulbricht's release.
Okay.
His behavior in prison, I've read that he's been, a model inmate,
Yeah.
tutoring others, participating in various programs.
That's right. His supporters, they point to his good behavior as evidence of his, of his remorse and his potential for rehabilitation.
Okay.
They argue that he's a changed man.
Yeah.
That he's learned from his mistakes and is committed to making amends.
So they're saying he's not the same person he was when he created Silk Road.
Yeah.
That he's grown and matured.
Exactly. They believe he served enough time.
Okay.
And that he deserves a chance to reintegrate into society.
Right.
and make a positive contribution.
Right.
They argue that keeping him locked up for life is not only cruel and unusual punishment,
Right.
but also a waste of human potential.
But what about those who believe he should remain in prison?
Right.
What are their arguments?
Well, as you might imagine, their perspective is quite different.
Okay.
They see Ulbricht as a dangerous criminal who knowingly and intentionally profited from the sale of illegal substances,
Right.
and put countless lives at risk.
Right.
They argue that his actions had real consequences,
Yeah.
contributing to addiction, crime, and potentially even deaths.
So they're saying that regardless of his his motivations,
Right.
or his current behavior, the harm he caused is it's too significant to ignore.
Right.
That justice demands he be held accountable.
Exactly. They also point to the fact that he was convicted by a jury of his peers,
Right.
and sentenced by a judge who carefully considered all the evidence.
Right.
They argue that overturning that verdict would undermine the rule of law and set a dangerous precedent.
It sounds like there are valid points on both sides.
Yeah.
It's a really tough call.
It is, and ultimately the decision of whether or not to release Ross Ulbricht rests with the legal system,
Right.
and potentially with the with the president, should they choose to grant him clemency.
So where does that leave us? What's the likely outcome of all this?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
The Free Ross movement has gained a lot of momentum in recent years, but it faces significant opposition from those who believe he should remain behind bars.
Right.
It's a complex case with no easy answers.
I guess that's what makes it so fascinating, right? It's a story that forces us to confront some pretty fundamental questions about justice, freedom, and the role of technology in our lives.
Exactly, and it's a story that will likely continue to unfold for years to come. Regardless of whether Ross Ulbricht is ultimately released or not, his legacy is going to continue to spark debate and raise important questions about the future of the internet,
right,
individual liberty, and the balance of power in a digital age.
So grifter or gifted? I mean, maybe it's not so simple. Maybe the real takeaway here is that the world is full of shades of gray.
Yeah.
And the line between good and bad, right and wrong is often blurred.
I think you hit the nail on the head. The Silk Road saga really challenges us to look beyond beyond easy labels
Right.
and simplistic narratives,
Right.
and really grapple with the complexity of human nature and the the unintended consequences of our actions.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can make terrible mistakes.
Right.
And that even the most well-intentioned actions can have devastating outcomes.
Absolutely, and perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that the choices we make in the digital world have real world impacts. The internet isn't some lawless frontier. It's a reflection of of our values,
Right.
Our flaws,
Right.
and our shared humanity.
Well, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
This deep dive has definitely given me a new perspective on Ross Ulbricht and the whole Silk Road saga.
Yeah.
Thanks for shedding some light on all of this.
It's been a fascinating conversation. I'm glad we could do this.
Yeah, me too.